June sat in the corner of the prison ship. His small human body looked weak next to the big alien guards walking the halls. The guards had sharp claws that made clicking sounds on the metal floor. Their long fangs shined under the bright lights. The Riken Empire had taken over Earth 3 years ago. In the whole galaxy, humans were seen as the weakest species, with soft skin, no claws, and no fangs. But the Rikens did not understand how determined humans could be. June closed his eyes and remembered his sister, Yuna. The Riken soldiers had taken her away to work in space mines where many died. "I'll find you," he had promised her. "I will come for you, no matter what." The other prisoners, aliens caught for different crimes against the Empire, stayed away from the human. Why make friends with someone who couldn't fight? June didn't mind. Being seen as weak had helped him stay alive. The ship suddenly shook and loud alarms started ringing. They had hit an asteroid field. In all the confusion, June saw his chance to escape. He slipped out of his cell while the guards were busy. He made his way to the escape pods, carrying only a small metal locket with Yuna's picture inside. As the escape pod shot into space, June set it to go to Nexus Station, the busiest place in the galaxy, and his first step to finding his sister. He might not have claws or fangs, but he had something more powerful, a promise he would never break, and the clever thinking that only humans pushed to their limits could have. The small pod flew into the dark of space. Inside was just one human who seemed unimportant, but would soon change everything in the galaxy. June watched through the pod's window as the prison ship grew smaller behind him. Stars stretched like bright lines as the pod's engines pushed it faster. His heart beat hard in his chest. He was free, but freedom was just the beginning. The pod's computer beeped, warning that Riken ships might be following. June quickly changed course, flying the pod into a thick dust cloud where sensors wouldn't work well. The dust particles hit the pod's shell with tiny pinging sounds. Each ping reminded him of the seconds ticking by while Yuna suffered in the mines. He pulled out the locket and clicked it open. Yuna's face smiled up at him, a picture from before the invasion. Her eyes held the same determination he felt in his bones. The Rikens had separated them, thinking that breaking apart families would break human spirit. They were wrong. The pod's air grew colder as life support systems struggled to keep working. June wrapped his thin prison uniform tighter around himself. The journey to Nexus Station would take 3 days in the small pod, with barely enough air and water. But discomfort was nothing new to him after years in Riken prisons. "I'm coming, Yuna," he whispered to the picture. "The Rikens think we're weak because we don't have natural weapons. They'll learn that a human with a purpose is the most dangerous creature in the galaxy." The pod computer showed that he had passed out of Riken space. Ahead lay the neutral zones where the Empire's reach was limited. June allowed himself a small smile. Step 1 complete. Nobody would look twice at another human refugee at Nexus Station. The Rikens wouldn't expect an escape in such a small pod. They wouldn't expect one soft, clawless human to challenge their mighty empire. That was their biggest mistake. They never expected anything from humans at all. The bustling corridors of Nexus Station were filled with hundreds of alien species from across the galaxy. Towering insectoids brushed past slithering reptilians, while hovering crystalline beings negotiated trade deals with fungal collectives. Among them all, Jun moved almost invisibly, his human stature making him easy to overlook. After 2 weeks of careful observation, Jun had learned the station's rhythms. He had found work in the kitchens of a seedy establishment called the Cosmic Maw, owned by Dole, an old 4-armed Servasi with a healthy disrespect for the Riken Empire. "You're a strange one," Dole said, watching Jun efficiently chop vegetables with a speed that surprised even the experienced cook. "Most humans I've met crumbled under Imperial rule." "I'm not most humans," Jun replied, his eyes never leaving his work. "I need information about the mining colonies in the Tyrellian belt." Dole's 4 eyes narrowed. "Those are death sentences, not colonies. The Rykans work their prisoners until they drop. No one comes back from there. My sister is there, Jum said simply. I promised I'd find her. Later that night, Jum was introduced to Mina, a Korean descendant smuggler who had escaped Earth before the invasion. Her ship, the Star Whisper, made regular runs to the outer systems, sometimes close to the mining colonies. You're crazy if you think you can break someone out of a Rykan mining operation, Mina said, sipping her glowing blue drink. But I like crazy. My grandfather used to say that humans survive because we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten. Jum showed her the locket with Yuna's picture. I just need passage to Tyrell 6. I'll figure out the rest. Mina studied him for a long moment. The Rykans are having a problem with the indigenous predators on Tyrell 6. They're losing guards faster than they can replace them. They might be looking for handlers, even human ones. For the first time since his escape, Jum felt a flicker of hope. When do we leave? First light, Mina replied, sliding a small device across the table. This is a subdermal translator. You'll need it to communicate with the predators. They're called Vashka, and they're nearly impossible to control, unless you know their language. Jum pocketed the device. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Mina warned. The Vashka have eaten every handler they've had so far. But maybe they'll find you too small to bother with. As he prepared for the journey, Jum knew the odds were stacked against him. But he had made a promise, and even without claws or fangs, a human's word could be the deadliest weapon in the galaxy. The surface of Tyrell 6 was a nightmarish landscape of jagged black rock and swirling toxic dust storms. Jum stood at the entrance to the massive mining complex, a series of deep shafts carved into the planet's crust, where prisoners extracted the precious Tyrellium ore that powered the Rykan fleet. The Rykan officer, Commander Xerix, towered over Jum, his scales gleaming in the dim light. You volunteer to handle the Vashka. Do you have a death wish, human? I have experience with predatory animals. Jum lied smoothly. On Earth, I worked with creatures not unlike your Vashka. The commander's laugh was like grinding metal. The Vashka have killed every handler we've assigned. But if you wish to die, who am I to deny you? Jum was led deep into the facility, past rows of exhausted prisoners working in the mines. His eyes scanned each face, searching for Yuna, but she wasn't among them. Finally, they reached a heavily reinforced door. The Vashka are used to pull the ore carts through the lower tunnels, the Rykan explained. They're stronger than any mechanical equipment we have, but they're difficult. The door slid open to reveal 6 massive creatures that resembled a cross between wolves and panthers, but with 6 legs and glowing red eyes. Their midnight black fur seemed to absorb the light around them, and their teeth were longer than Jum's fingers. Once alone with the creatures, Jum activated the subdermal translator Mina had given him. The device burned as it attached to his nervous system, and suddenly he could sense the Vashka's thoughts. Not words exactly, but emotions and images. Their collective hatred for the Rykans hit him like a physical blow. The Vashka were not mere animals. They were intelligent, with a complex social structure. The Rykans had slaughtered their packs and enslaved the survivors. Instead of approaching with dominance as the previous handlers had done, Jum sat on the ground, making himself smaller. He projected thoughts of respect and shared imprisonment. I am not your enemy, he communicated through the translator. I am a prisoner like you. I seek my sister. Help me, and I will help free you. The largest Vashka, a scared female Jum would later name Sora, approached cautiously. In her mind, Jum saw images of Vashka cubs being taken away, and he understood. She too had lost family. By morning, Jum emerged from the enclosure unharmed, with the 6 Vashka following calmly behind him. The Rykan guards watched in disbelief as the previously uncontrollable creatures obeyed the small human's quiet commands. Commander Xerix was suspicious but pleased. Perhaps you humans have some use after all. You'll begin work in the deep tunnels tomorrow. As Jum led the Vashka back to their holding area, Sora's mind voice reached him clearly. "We smell your sister kin in the eastern quadrant. She still lives." Jun felt his heart race. Yuna was alive, and now he had allies with claws and fangs. His promise was within reach. 2 months had passed since Jun began working with the Vashka, guiding them through the deepest tunnels of the mining complex. The Riken guards had grown accustomed to the sight of the small human commanding the fearsome beasts, though they never approached too closely. The Vashka tolerated only Jun, snapping at anyone else who came near. Through their mental connection, Sora and the other Vashka had helped Jun map the entire facility. His sister Yuna was being held in the eastern quadrant, working in the refinery section, where raw tyrelium was processed into fuel. The guards there were more numerous, the security tighter. During his rare breaks, Jun had managed to make contact with other human prisoners. He met Da, a former Earth resistance fighter who had been captured during the initial invasion, and He-Jin, a young engineer forced to maintain the mining equipment. They became his eyes and ears in parts of the facility he couldn't access. "The Rikens are planning a big shipment next week," He-Jin whispered during a brief encounter in the common area. "They're bringing in additional guards and doubling production quotas. That means they'll transfer more prisoners to the refinery," Dai added. "Including your sister's unit." Jun nodded thoughtfully. "A transfer is our best chance. The regular patterns will be disrupted." That night, in the quiet darkness of the Vashka den, Jun sat with Sora, sharing his plan through their mental link. The massive predator's red eyes gleamed with intelligence as she added her own insights. "The ventilation system," Sora projected, showing him mental images of narrow tunnels that ran throughout the facility. "My smallest pack member, Jun, can navigate them." Jun saw the logic immediately. Jiun, the youngest and smallest of the Vashka, could carry messages and small tools through these maintenance tunnels, creating a network that the Rikens knew nothing about. Over the next few days, through this secret network, Jun coordinated with Dai and He-Jin. Small acts of sabotage began occurring throughout the facility: equipment failures, power fluctuations, inventory discrepancies. Nothing major enough to trigger a full security response, but enough to create confusion and stretch the guards thin. Commander Xerix grew increasingly irritable as reports of malfunctions piled up. He summoned Jun to his office, his clawed hands flexing with barely contained anger. "Strange things have been happening since you arrived, human," he hissed. "I don't believe in coincidences." Jun kept his expression neutral. "The equipment is old, Commander, and the Vashka are sensitive to changes in the tunnel atmospherics. Perhaps the ventilation systems need maintenance." The suggestion led to exactly what Jun had hoped. Maintenance crews were sent to inspect the ventilation system, providing He-Jin with access to critical security nodes. That night, He-Jin smuggled a data chip to Jun via Jun's secret path. "I've downloaded the transfer schedule. Your sister will be moved 3 days from now. At the shift change, it's your best chance." As Jun studied the data, he felt Sora's presence in his mind. "The pack is ready," she communicated. "When the time comes, we will show the Rikens why they should fear things with claws and fangs." Jun smiled grimly. The Rikens had always underestimated humans because they lacked natural weapons. They were about to learn that determination could be sharper than any claw, and a promise more deadly than any fang. The day of the transfer arrived with the facility in disarray. He-Jin's carefully orchestrated equipment failures had peaked, forcing maintenance crews to work overtime. Security personnel were stretched thin, covering multiple areas as systems failed across the complex. Jun led the Vashka through their regular duties, giving no indication that today was different. Through their mental link, he could sense their anticipation, a predatory readiness that they carefully concealed from the Riken guards. At precisely the 3rd hour of the work shift, alarms blared throughout the eastern quadrant. He-Jin had triggered a containment breach in an unused section, forcing an evacuation of 3 adjacent areas, including the path that would be used to transfer Yuna's work group. Now, June whispered to Sora. The lead Vashka let out a bone-chilling howl that was echoed by the rest of the pack. The sound reverberated through the tunnels, creating confusion among the guards. In the chaos, the Vashka suddenly turned on their Riken handlers, not killing them but herding them into an equipment room that Dai had prepared. The doors slammed shut, locking automatically. June sprinted through the now empty corridors, guided by the facility map Hajin had provided. The transfer would pass through Junction C7, a narrow passageway with minimal surveillance. He reached the junction just as the first prisoners were being marched through, their ankles shackled and heads bowed. Riken guards flanked the group, their attention divided by the ongoing alarms and security alerts flooding their communication channels. And then he saw her. Yuna was thinner than he remembered, her face gaunt from months of hard labor, but her eyes still held the same determination he remembered. She walked in the middle of the group, head higher than those around her. Through Jian, the smallest Vashka who had been navigating the ventilation system, Jun had arranged for a power surge to hit this section at exactly this moment. The lights flickered and died, plunging the corridor into darkness. The Riken guards activated their bioluminescent scales, casting an eerie glow over the frightened prisoners. But in those few seconds of confusion, Jun had slipped into the group, positioned himself beside Yuna, and pressed a small tool into her hand. A universal key that Hojin had modified to open the Riken restraints. "Don't react," he whispered. "It's me." Yuna's breath caught, but she maintained her composure, her fingers closing around the key. "When I give the signal, unlock your shackles and follow my lead," Jun murmured. "Be ready to run." As the guards reorganized the prisoner line, Jun felt Sora's presence approaching through a connecting tunnel. The Vashka had dispatched the guards in their section and were now converging on Jun's position. "Now," Jun said, louder this time. In one fluid motion, Yuna unlocked her restraints and those of the prisoners on either side of her. The action created a ripple effect as each freed prisoner helped another. The guards realized too late what was happening. As they raised their weapons, 6 massive shapes burst from the side tunnel. Sora and her pack, teeth bared and claws extended. The sight of the unleashed Vashka sent the guards into a panic, especially when they realized the creatures were acting with coordinated intelligence rather than blind aggression. "This way," Jun called to the freed prisoners, leading them toward a maintenance shaft that Dai had secured. Not all chose to follow. Some fled in different directions in the chaos, but Yuna and a dozen others ran after Jun. Finally, in the relative safety of the maintenance tunnel, Jun and Yuna embraced for the first time in 3 years. "You came," she whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "You actually came for me." "I promised, didn't I?" Jun replied, his voice thick with emotion. "No matter what it took." Yuna pulled back, noticing the Vashka that stood protectively around them. "You made some interesting friends." "We understand each other," Jun said as Sora nudged his hand with her massive head. "None of us belong in cages." Through their mental link, Sora communicated, "The path to the surface is clear, but it won't remain so for long. We must move quickly." Jun nodded, turning to the group of escaped prisoners. "This isn't over. Getting out of the facility is just the first step, but I have a plan." As they moved through the shadowy tunnels toward freedom, Jun knew that the real battle was just beginning. The Rikens wouldn't let them escape without a pursuit, and surviving on the hostile surface of Tyrell 6 would be its own challenge. But for the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel hope. He had kept his promise to Yuna, and with the Vashka by their side, perhaps humans weren't as defenseless as the Rikens believed. The surface of Tyrell 6 was even more forbidding than the mining complex beneath it. Howling winds carried toxic particles that scored exposed skin, while the temperature dropped to lethal levels when the planet's twin suns dipped below the horizon. For the escaped prisoners, the harsh landscape was both their greatest threat and their best protection against Riken pursuit. Jun led the group across the jagged terrain, following Sora's guidance, The Vashka were native to this world and knew its dangers intimately. Through their mental link, Jun learned of hidden caves, underground water sources, and the safest paths through the wasteland. The Rykans will send atmospheric cruisers to search for us, Dai warned as they huddled in a deep ravine, sheltering from both the elements and potential aerial detection. They can't afford to let a successful escape go unchallenged. It would inspire others. Let them come, Yuna said, her voice stronger now that she was free. During their journey, Jun had learned that his sister had become a leader among the human prisoners, organizing quiet resistance and maintaining morale. We've survived worse. Their group had grown to 23, 14 humans, and 9 aliens of various species who had chosen to follow Jun and the Vashka rather than strike out on their own. Among them was Kwon, a Korean exobiologist who had been captured while studying Tyrell 6's indigenous life forms before the Rykan invasion. The Vashka aren't just predators, Kwon explained as he examined Sora with undisguised fascination. They're the planet's apex species, with intelligence comparable to Earth dolphins or higher primates. The Rykans treat them as animals because acknowledging their sentience would complicate the legal justification for mining operations here. Jun nodded, unsurprised. Through his deepening connection with the Vashka pack, he had glimpsed the richness of their culture. Their pack bonds, their oral histories passed through shared memories, their complex understanding of Tyrell 6's ecosystems. On the 5th day after their escape, as they traveled through a maze-like canyon that Sora assured them would mask their heat signatures from Rykan scanners, they discovered they weren't alone. From hidden crevices and shadowy caves, more Vashka emerged, dozens of them, wild and free, unlike the captive pack Jun had liberated. Sora approached the largest of these wild Vashka, a male with a distinctive white patch over his left eye. Through their mental connection, Jun witnessed a complex exchange of memories and emotions. Sora was showing the wild pack leader everything that had happened in the mines, including Jun's assistance in their escape. The wild packs have been waging their own war against the Rykans. Jun translated for the others. They've been sabotaging outlying facilities and attacking supply convoys, but they've never been able to breach the main mining complex. Until now, Yuna said, understanding dawning in her eyes. They needed someone on the inside. The white-patched Vashka, whom Jun came to know as Ta, approached him cautiously. Unlike Sora and her captive pack, the wild Vashka had never formed a bond with a human before. But as Ta's consciousness touched Jun's through the translator implant, there was a sense of cautious respect. That night, around fires carefully shielded to prevent detection, humans, aliens, and Vashka formed an unlikely council. Through Jun's translation, they learned that the Vashka had a vast network of underground dens and tunnels that honeycombed the planet, a shadow civilization that the Rykans had never fully discovered. They're offering us sanctuary, Jun explained after a lengthy mental exchange with Tai and Sora. But they want something in return. They want our help to drive the Rykans from their world. We're escaped prisoners and a handful of predators against an Imperial mining operation with orbital support. One of the alien prisoners, a reptilian engineer named Saltz, pointed out. Those aren't favorable odds. Yuna stood, facing the gathered escapees. When the Rykans came to Earth, they didn't think we stood a chance either. They saw us as soft, clawless creatures who would submit or perish. They were wrong about us then, and they're wrong about us now. She looked at the Vashka, their red eyes gleaming in the firelight. The Rykans think their claws and fangs make them superior, but we have something they don't understand. The ability to form bonds across species, to find strength in alliance rather than conquest. A murmur of agreement spread through the group. Even the aliens who had initially been wary of the Vashka were beginning to see the potential of their unlikely coalition. Jun felt a surge of pride as he watched his sister rally their disparate band of fugitives. The Rykans had underestimated humans because they lacked natural weapons, but they had failed to recognize humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage: adaptability. As the twin moons of Tyrell 6 rose over the wasteland, illuminating the harsh beauty of the alien landscape, Jun and Yuna stood with Sora and Tai, four leaders united by circumstance and determination. Together, they began to plan not just for survival, but for revolution. 3 months after the escape, what had begun as a desperate flight across Tyrell 6's wastelands had transformed into a coordinated insurgency. The mining complex, once the symbol of Riken dominance, now stood as an isolated fortress in increasingly hostile territory. From the vast network of Vashka tunnels, now serving as the resistance headquarters, Jun, Yuma, and their growing coalition orchestrated strikes against Riken supply lines and communication relays. Each success brought new allies, more escaped prisoners, disaffected civilian contractors, and even a few Riken deserters who had grown disillusioned with the Empire's brutal methods. Quan, the exobiologist, had made a breakthrough in improving the neural translator, allowing the humans to communicate more effectively with the Vashka. This deeper connection revealed that the Vashka had abilities the Rikens had never discovered, including a form of bioelectric sense that allowed them to detect and manipulate electronic fields. It's how they navigate their tunnel networks in complete darkness, Quan explained to the resistance leaders gathered in the central cavern, and why machinery often malfunctions around untrained Vashka. They're unintentionally disrupting the electronics. Yuma immediately saw the tactical implications. If we can harness this ability deliberately, we could disable Riken security systems without risking our tech specialists. The development of this new capability became their focus for the next weeks. The Vashka, eager to contribute to the liberation of their world, worked closely with Quan and Hejin to refine their control over their bioelectric sense. Meanwhile, Jun had been working with Dai to establish contact with resistance cells on other worlds within the Riken Empire. Using a communication array salvaged from an abandoned Riken outpost, they managed to make contact with Minna, the smuggler who had helped Jun reach Tyrell 6. The Empire is stretched thin, Minna reported during their secure transmission. Rebellions have broken out on 3 other mining worlds, inspired by rumors of what's happening on Tyrell 6. They're calling you the human handler in the outer systems, the clawless one who turned the Empire's weapons against them. Jun grimaced at the nickname, but understood its propaganda value. We need more than inspiration. We need supplies, weapons. I can help with that, Minna replied. There's a growing coalition of free traders willing to run the Imperial blockade. We could be there within a standard month. That night, as Jun and Yuna walked along a high ridge overlooking the mining complex in the distance, they allowed themselves a moment of reflection on how far they had come. When I promised to find you, I never imagined it would lead to all this, Jun admitted, gesturing to the sprawling Vashka encampment below, where hundreds of beings from dozens of species now worked together. Yuma smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen since their reunion. You never did think small enough. She placed a hand on his shoulder. The Rikens took everything from us, our home, our family, our future. But in doing so, they gave us something they'll never understand. What's that? Jun asked. Nothing left to lose, she replied simply. And a galaxy of oppressed people with everything to gain. Their moment of peace was interrupted by the arrival of Sora, her mental presence conveying urgency before she physically appeared on the ridge. The Deep Scouts have returned, Jun translated for Yuna. Imperial reinforcements have entered the system, a battle cruiser and troop carriers. They're finally taking us seriously, Yuna said grimly. Through his connection with Sora, Jun received a flood of images, the positions of Vashka scouts, the movement of Riken patrols, the areas where their defenses were being strengthened. They're preparing for a major operation, he told Yuna. Not just to secure the mining complex, but to exterminate the Vashka once and for all. They're bringing in specialized hunting units and terraforming equipment. Yuna's expression hardened. Then we strike first. Tonight. The plan they had been developing for weeks would need to be accelerated. It was risky, But with Imperial reinforcements on the way, waiting was no longer an option. As they returned to the caverns to alert the others, Jun felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. What had begun as a personal promise to save his sister had evolved into a struggle for the freedom of an entire world. The stakes had never been higher, and the cost of failure would be measured not just in human lives, but in the extinction of the Vashka and the continued expansion of Riken tyranny. Yet as he looked at the determined faces of their unlikely coalition, humans without claws or fangs, standing shoulder to shoulder with the fearsome Vashka, he felt a surge of fierce hope. The Rikens had built their empire on the presumption of natural superiority, never understanding that true strength came not from biological weapons, but from bonds forged in shared struggle. Tonight, they would teach the Empire that lesson in blood and fire. The resistance struck at dusk, when the mining complex's shifts changed and security protocols momentarily relaxed during the transition. Years of Riken confidence in their superior physical strength had bred complacency, creating vulnerabilities that Jun and Yuna's forces were primed to exploit. The attack began with no visible movement at all. At the perimeter defense stations, Riken guards suddenly found their communication systems malfunctioning and their weapon systems powering down. In the darkness beyond the floodlights, dozens of Vashka lay with their eyes closed, using their bioelectric sense to systematically disable the complex's outer defenses. First barrier down, Hujin reported from the command post established in a high cave overlooking the facility. Beginning Phase 2. Across the wasteland, 5 teams of mixed human and alien raiders, each accompanied by Vashka guides, converged on the complex from different directions. They moved through weak points identified during months of observation: maintenance tunnels, ventilation shafts, and waste disposal chutes. Jun led the central strike team, with Sora at his side. Their target was the central control hub, where they could override the lockdown protocols and open the way for the main assault force. Yuna commanded that larger force, positioned to rush the main gates once they were opened. As they approached the complex, Jun felt Sora's tension through their mental link. Many guards, she communicated. They smelled different. New ones. The reinforcements must have arrived earlier than we expected. Jun whispered to his team. We need to move faster. Inside the complex, they encountered the first real resistance, a squad of Riken soldiers with newer armor and weapons than the mining security forces. Unlike the guards who had grown used to dealing with cowed prisoners, these were battle-hardened troops. The firefight was brief but intense. 2 of Jun's team fell to Riken fire before Sora and 3 other Vashka launched themselves at the soldiers from the shadows. What the Vashka lacked in armor or weapons, they made up for in speed and ferocity. The sight of the creatures attacking in coordinated patterns rather than mindless aggression clearly unnerved the Riken troops. They're not used to prey that fights back strategically, Dai observed as they continued toward the control hub. When they reached the heavily fortified door of the control center, they found it sealed with a security protocol that even Hujin's override codes couldn't crack. Time was running out. Soon the Rikens would realize this wasn't just another prisoner uprising, but a coordinated assault. We need another way in, Jun said urgently. Sora's mental voice came clearly. Above, the thermal regulation conduits. Following her guidance, they located a maintenance panel that led to the climate control system for the control room. The passage was narrow, too small for the Riken guards to use during normal operations, but just large enough for a human. I'll go, Jun said, already removing his bulkier equipment. It's too dangerous, Dad protested. If they spot you in there, you'll have nowhere to run. Jun handed him the command transmitter. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, tell Yuma to launch the main assault anyway. We won't get another chance. The conduit was even tighter than it had appeared, forcing Jun to crawl on his belly through dust and debris. The Rikens, with their larger frames and rigid exoskeletons, would never have considered this a potential entry point. It was, Jun reflected grimly, one of the few advantages to being considered the galaxy's weakest species. He emerged through a vent directly into the control hub, dropping silently behind a bank of monitoring equipment. 3 Riken officers manned the stations, with Commander Xerix himself overseeing the operations, his back to June. Drawing the shock baton Hejin had modified with Vashka bioelectric properties, Jun moved swiftly. The first officer went down without a sound, the electrical charge overloading his nervous system. The second managed to turn, eyes widening at the sight of the escaped human prisoner, before meeting the same fate. Commander Xerix, however, was faster than his subordinates. He spun around, slashing at Jun with his formidable claws. Jun barely dodged, the razor-sharp talons slicing through his jacket and drawing blood. "I knew you were trouble from the moment you arrived," Xerix hissed, advancing on Jun. "A human with ambitions above his station. Your kind always overreach." Jun circled warily, shock baton ready. "You never understood us. Humans don't need claws or fangs to be dangerous. We make promises and keep them." The commander lunged again, his superior strength and speed nearly overwhelming Jun. In a desperate move, Jun rolled beneath a console, using the confined space to his advantage. As Xerix reached for him, jaws snapping, Jun drove the shock baton into the commander's exposed underarm, one of the few vulnerable points in Riken anatomy. The massive alien convulsed as the modified electrical charge coursed through his system, enhanced by the Vashka bioelectric technology to specifically target Riken neural pathways. He collapsed, temporarily paralyzed but still conscious. Jun quickly secured him, then moved to the main console. Following Heijin's instructions, he disabled the security lockdowns and opened the main gates. Within moments, alarms blared throughout the facility as the system detected the breach. Outside, Yuna's forces surged forward, a wave of determined fighters from a dozen species, backed by the full might of the Vashka packs. The battle for the mining complex had begun in earnest. "You've doomed them all," Xerix said from the floor, his voice strained but defiant. "The Empire will never allow this insurrection to succeed. The reinforcements will burn this entire planet to ash rather than lose it." Jun activated the communication array, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Jun Park to all Imperial forces. We have taken control of Mining Complex Alpha. Commander Xerix is our prisoner. We have also seized control of the Tyrelium refineries and the antimatter containment facilities." He looked directly at Xerix as he delivered the final message. "Any orbital bombardment or mass attack will detonate enough antimatter to destroy not only this facility, but render the entire Tyrelium deposit unusable for a century. The Empire's war machine runs on Tyrelium. Are you willing to lose your most productive source?" It was a calculated bluff. They hadn't actually rigged the antimatter containers yet, though Heijin had teams working on it. But the Rikens, used to species that either submitted or fought,